believe that Americans and Canadians need, not in a month's time or a year's time, because this is a problem right now. We can talk about a particular case study in the next part of the show. These people can switch on an attack of Zersetzung, if you will, in any country in the world, because what they have access to is what I would call decomposed families. In French, you might say les familles décomposées, because these families, for example, let's take in the case of British Columbia, the original members could come from Rwanda or from Myanmar or from Ukraine, and some of those members are war criminals. They've been engaged in killing, torturing, blowing up people. They come with their relatives, and their relatives are more or less innocent. But if you're part of a family and you arrive in British Columbia and the Family Maintenance Enforcement Program starts handing out benefits within the family, you can easily alienate the family, because if you get something that's taken from another member of the family, you end up with stress in the family, alienation from the children, and you now, I believe, horrifically, you're weaponizing the family.
Is it socially positive?
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And, you know, I'm just so hooked on this Zersetzung, because it's so obviously the technique that these guys are trying to copy. I mean, that doesn't mean they're working for the Stasi, of course. They could have just read this and said, hey, that's a good idea. Let's do that.
Sorry?
Well, there's much more than that, you see, because if you look at the career of Bill Clinton,
it's red,
right, and Pierre Trudeau,
you know what
there's such thing, the Soviet Union and the East German secret police were in very close contact, shared offices, shared tactics, shared techniques, and shared methods, because it's a fundamental way for an authoritarian state to impose its regime by breaking up the families that might otherwise object and resist. The Chinese do it, the Soviet Union does it, North Korea does it, etc. And they're guided in the practice by these people that specialize in family decomposition.
Yes.
So remember, Pierre Trudeau was in Moscow in 1952 as leader of the Canadian Communist Party delegation to an economic conference, right? You've got this extraordinary picture of Vladimir Putin, right? And I've forgotten that. He's in Dresden. If he was in Dresden, right, with the KGB, which he was, he would have been working hand in glove with the Stasi, and he would know all about this idea of family decomposition.
Now, wait a minute. This is interesting. So I just looked up Putin Stasi, because there he is. Now, what we should keep in mind is, we're looking at a photo of the guy. You could take his picture from his passport and stick it on here. I don't know, is this his signature? Do we know if this is authentic? Vladimir Putin Stasi ID, a press sensation and its historical reality from the Wilson Center. Now, let's keep in mind, Nina Jankowicz, who was the executive director of the Disinformation Governance Board, was a anti-Russian, fellow at the Wilson Center. So we should be cautious and skeptical of information that they present. But it says recently a press sensation began in Germany and spread across the globe when an identification card from the East German Ministry of State, the Stasi, was found in the Stasi records archive with the name and picture of Russian President Vladimir Putin. On a personal note, I did not find the ID card, despite some early press reports to the contrary. So we've already got conflicting information about this thing. The person writing the article, Doug Selvage, says he didn't find it. It's been a well-known fact that Putin served from 1985 to 1990 as a KGB officer in Dresden.
Can we stop there? Can we stop there, please? Right, because in 1988, remember, there's lots of events in our narratives that we've been studying. Lots of events go on in 1988, including Joe Biden's brain experiments or sorry, not experiments, surgery.
I can hear you disintegrating while you talk to me.
It wasn't experimental because the results would be appalling. But anyway, from 1985 to 1990, the Stasi were being wound down, right? So true committed blood socialists would have been very, very worried that the technique that they developed and refined and perfected would be lost forever. So one of those, some people who might be very worried about that would be Vladimir Putin, right, assuming that he was in Dresden. Another would be the confirmed and committed socialist, Pierre Trudeau. So they needed to salvage, and it's very interesting. At the end of the Second World War, there was, I think they called them the T-Force, one of them directed by Ian Fleming, the author of Bond stories, to go into Germany and grab scientists and research papers, etc., etc. So with the Stasi being wound down, there would have been pressure from the committed socialists around the world. Let's get possibly the Stasi files, or perhaps more appropriately, the Stasi techniques and interrogation. Now, you remember Lowy, Frederick Lowy, helped Cameron Otis, not Cameron